So, today I'm going to continue reading Chapter 3 of the book Transactionalism by Trevor J. Phillips. And we're going to cover the theory of inquiry, the theory of truth, and the theory of value in this recording. The theory of inquiry. It is instructive to examine in greater detail the meaning given by transactionalists to inquiry. To the transactional movement, inquiry and knowledge theory are closely interwoven, and their metaphysical stance is constantly invoked. This despite the rejection of ontological and epistemological postulations. The transactional theory of inquiry undoubtedly finds its fullest expression in Dewey's Logic, the Theory of Inquiry. It is claimed by Bentley to represent the thoroughgoing development of a logic without ontology, without what that is, appeal to special supernatural realms of being. In contrast to other systems of logic, Dewey sees men in natural action in problematic situations, developing situations which in due course open up new problems leading to further and newer solutions. His procedure throughout is open-ended in correspondence with the manifest scientific characteristics of nature so far as we have yet become acquainted with them. For Bentley, in accordance with Dewey, inquiry became the factual exhibit of the very processes of knowing, and of the appraisal of knowings called logical. Dewey, 10 years after the publication of the Logic, admitted he attempted to convert the ontological as prior to inquiry into the logical, as occupied wholly and solely with what takes place in the conduct of inquiry as an ever-going concern. And again, he wrote of his transference of so-called ontological separations into distinctions that serve a useful, indeed necessary function in conduct of inquiry. It is the transactional belief that the older epistemology in no small measure attempted to make ontological conclusions depend upon prior investigations of the conditions and nature of knowledge. This attempt, however, was based upon the assumption that knowledge is reliant upon an independent knower and a something to be known, an assumption, as has been indicated, denied by transactionalism. Knowledge was also regarded as a process taking place, or as a status located in or at an animal organism, especially human. Newer theories, leaning toward the transactional and including the situational constructions to be examined in the following chapter, look upon knowledge not as the capacity of an organism, but directly as itself a process that arises in the situation, organism, environment. The organism remains central, nuclear, if one will, but abdicates as Lord Proprietor. In fact, the underlying postulation of the evolving approach of Dewey and Bentley, including the statement that knowing, as inquiry, is a way or distinct form of behavior. But more than this, knowing, again as inquiry, is transactional in pattern in that it is constituted by the cooperation or working together of activities which, when they are distinguished, are referred respectively to an organism in one respect and to environing conditions in another regard. Knowledge, if the term is to be employed at all, is a name for the product of competent inquiries, and is constituted only as the outcome of a particular inquiry. Far from having the status immutability, knowledge results from the act of inquiry in such a way that it is available as a resource in further inquiry, not being settled in such a way as not to be subject to revision in further inquiry. The conclusions of inquiry must be construed in terms of procedures used to establish them, and objects of knowledge, when viewed as products of inquiry, cannot be assigned an existence antecedent to it. The concept of inquiry sees the knowing process not as a series of interactions between an independent knower and an independent object or environment, but as a transaction occurring within a particular biological sociological region. The theory of truth. Transactionalists characterize nature as a single system of subject matters of inquiry. By nature, they somewhat circuitously have reference to that with which inquiry is concerned, to the exclusion of concern with nature as an entity independent of research. Dewey himself, in labeling his logic a naturalistic theory, was calling attention to two particular aspects of his work. In the first place, he was emphasizing the continuity existing between operations of inquiry and biological and physical operations. From the early days of his reflex arc paper, in which he maintained that behaviors were neither mental nor physiological, but subjects of research in their own right, he had stressed this theme. By continuity, he meant rational operations grow out of organic activities. Thus he attempted, along with Peirce, James, and Bentley, to continue the efforts of Darwin, who brought animal and then human life into a space-time framework within which scientific inquiry could operate, and who worked out a method of applying the evolutionary approach to all forms and aspects of life, including the cognitive. Dewey's logic was naturalistic also insomuch as within it the activities or processes of inquiry are observable, but conceptions derived from a mystical faculty of intuition or anything that is so occult as not to be open to public inspection and verification, such as the purely psychical, for example, are excluded. This, then, is the transactionalist's natural system. Man, the knower, as the locus of knowing, in the system of nature, and nature, which is to be studied as it is found under way of being known to man. From the preceding paragraphs, it is clear that the toleration by transactionalists of anything resembling an ultimate truth or absolute knowledge is out of the question. The former has never found favor with the pragmatic transactional school. For it, the only alternative to the definition of truth as warranted assertability is to maintain that something is true or false independent of any evidence or methods by which truth or falsity is reached. It has already been seen that no theories or realities are accepted by transactionalists as inherently settled beyond question, because they deal with eternal and immutable being. It was also seen that both the ontological and the epistemological approaches are excluded from the transactional process of knowing, as are all metaphysical considerations supposed to guarantee authenticity and validity. Phrased non-technically, knowledge is a transaction that develops out of man's explorations within the cosmos. And truth, or for that matter falsity, is a function of the deliberately striven for consequences arising out of inquiry. What was traditionally held to be final is now regarded as tentative. Other conditions or methods of operation may alter consequences. Hence, ultimates and absolutes cannot be tolerated within such a postulation. Whenever they are upheld, logic, the generalized account of the means by which sound beliefs on any subject are attained and tested, loses its autonomy and has parted company with the actual practices by means of which such beliefs are established. Truth is, from the transactional viewpoint, distorted by man's propensity to employ hypostatized underpinnings. There is the constant danger that what is in effect instrumental or functional will be rendered self-sufficient and isolated. It is this age-old power of words to encapsulate meaning by denying the connections among things that transactionalism attempts to destroy. By replacing idle words with dynamic namings conjoined with events named. The theory of value. The foregoing accounts of the relationship between knowledge and inquiry paved the way for a consideration of the transactional approach to valuation. This approach, in turn, further illuminates the earlier accounts, for it is viewed as itself a form of inquiry, arising when some conflict intervenes in the normal experiencing of the individual. Dewey was the most imaginative contributor to the transactional discussion of values and valuation. It was his assertion that operational thinking needs to be applied to the judgment of values in precisely the same way it has been applied in conceptions of physical objects. He noted that what traditionally was held to be the true and valid object of knowledge was that which has being prior to and independent of the actual operations of knowing. Then, when material of direct and uncontrolled experience came to be regarded as problematic, as supplying the material eventually to be transformed by intelligent operations into known objects, the scientific revolution occurred. Dewey then went on to say that the consequences of these operations became all important in valuation as well as in establishing truth. Such consequences are produced only through a transactional relationship with other existential conditions. Thus, there is literally no way to gauge the probable consequences in advance, except in terms of probability based on past experiences, personal or recorded. Value, then, must be defined through enjoyments which are themselves the consequences of intelligent action, that is, action pervaded by thought. Dewey distinguished between satisfying and the satisfactory. To say that something is capable of satisfying is to refer to it as an isolated finality, having qualities that are independent of any other considerations. However, to declare something satisfactory is to assert that it meets specifiable conditions. It is, in effect, a judgment that the thing will do. It involves a prediction. It contemplates a future in which the thing will continue to serve. It will do. It asserts a consequence the thing will actively institute. It will do. It denotes an attitude to be taken, that of striving to perpetuate or to make secure. A differentiation is made also between two meanings of the term value. One meaning denotes the attitude of prizing a thing, of finding it worthwhile. For Dewey, to value in this sense is to appreciate. Value may also refer to the act of comparing and judging, to appraising, putting a value on. Prizing stands for a behavioral transaction, or at the very least an attitude or disposition taken toward things or persons, and having absolutely no meaning if isolated from that which it is toward. To hold this particular view of value is to subscribe to the belief that there is always an event or thing having existence independently of being prized or valued, to which the quality or property of value is added under specified conditions of spacetime. In this matter of value, transactionalists are concerned about the relationship existing between ends and means. They reject any view that seeks to manipulate the latter in order to venerate or placate the former. Already instated in some special realm of its own. For them, things can be anticipated or foreseen as ends or outcomes only in terms of the conditions by which they are brought into existence. It is impossible to have an end in view or to anticipate the consequences of any proposed line of action save upon the basis of some, however slight, consideration of the means by which it can be brought into existence. There is, in effect, a transaction between means and ends. They are twin aspects of a larger event. In the very last years of his life, Dewey wrote of the interconnected transactional distinctions between the how, the what, or subject matter, and the why, or what for. He reasserted his belief in the reciprocal connection between means and consequences. By reciprocal, he meant that consequences have to be determined on the grounds of what is selected and handled as means, in exactly the same sense in which the converse holds, and demands constant attention if activities are to be intelligently conducted. From this theoretical discussion, it follows that the good life, for the transactionalist, is comprised of a unity of values, achieved by means of reflective thought, and accepted in the full light of their conditions and consequences. Moral judgments, by the same token, must be arrived at only after the consequences of alternative moral injunctions have been worked out. For moral judgments are but predictive and prognoses arising out of the constant transactions between the individual and his intelligent actions, and his projected course of action. The proof of a good is found in the fact that a person responds. His response is use. A thing possesses value when its user or possessor is genuinely concerned with its instrumentality.